What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Troponin Episodes, episode 32. Friendly reminder, you can like, subscribe, turn on notifications, drop us a comment, remind us the age-old question if you are Team Guac or Team Nut Butter. And again, if you're enjoying these episodes, please share, tag us. We're really trying to continue to put out great information in the industry. If there's anything that you would like answered, let us know. But otherwise, we really appreciate your support. If you could go ahead and share some of these.
Please do.
Yeah, that would be great. Also, you can go ahead and get signed up on teamtroponin.com if you're looking for more information on any topics we previously covered. A lot of times we use that as kind of a dovetail for where we'll write more individual work. I'm also vlogging pretty much all of my prep. I'm 11 weeks out from Puerto Rico Pro right now. I'm feeling pretty, tired, but looking pretty good. And I have a train log as well as like the PT brain in on some of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So
and I think we're adding new content contributors also, so yes. You'll be getting even more content.
We're going to kick off today's discussion. Last time we talked about kind of the PED cycle, but it seems like almost every top level male coach kind of lands on for his dudes. We're going to have the female analog to that here with Justin, and he's going to kind of kick us off.
We're doing the female version.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, every female kind of starts 10 milligrams Anavar, and then they see, wow, I look better and no side effects really happen. And I'll preface the big thing with female, the big difference, and it is they're two totally different ways to look at how you cycle between men and women, because men, you're shutting down their natural testosterone. So women don't have that worry. A man, as soon as he does that first cycle, he has to decide whether he's going to do a full PCT and try to get his natural production back, or is he going to be on TRT for life? And that's a big one. And then the other big thing is the side effects the man has to worry about are major health side effects. Mm-hmm. Blood pressure, cholesterol, things as you've seen from bodybuilders dying in recent years. Well, women, it's really a totally different thing. So men have their, how long am I going to be on based on these things? My red blood cell count climbs too fast after a certain point. If I want to get my natural test back, I can only really run 12-week cycles, and I need to probably be off for 12 weeks at a time. With women, it's none of that. It's really 100% side effect driven. It's and virilization, because it's am I getting any side effects that are going to be irreversible? And because irreversible is a big word, because
yeah, for sure.
So that's real. So it's a totally different approach. And I think the worst thing that happens with female cycles is they get their first cycle from their boyfriend, who does not view it that way at all, because most of the male stuff is reversible. If a guy takes a buttload of Tren and his blood pressure spikes up and eats orals like they're candy, and his ALT and AST are 500. He can remove, stop taking the orals and get off the Tren, and his blood work is going to improve. If a woman takes something and she grows facial hair, she doesn't get you to say, well, let me stop taking it, and I go, everything goes back to normal. It's so, and that's the big problem, because typically the person giving them that first cycle advice is the worst person to be doing it. Mm-hmm. But women respond very well to Anavar, almost always, and most women can run like a low dose, like 10 milligrams of Anavar, relatively indefinitely with very minimal issues. They probably have to come off periodically, but most can run it almost year round with no real virilization, no major changes to facial structure or voice or anything like that. And then the next thing most you end up trying to get onto is primobolan, which is great if you get real primo, because it naturally lowers estrogen, which is one of the things that it makes it harder for women to get in shape, and it's really hard on women when you're because lowering a man's estrogen from a normal range of like 24, what is it, picogram per, yeah, where a woman like at their highest phase of her cycle might be 600, so you've got like almost 2 orders of magnitude difference that you have to lower. So they really the AIs have to really bury. And then you also have to consider an AI for a woman, how much of their estrogen is coming from aromatization.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask that. Why? I've been curious about this since we've been working with you. Why does that work well for women when so little of their estrogen comes from aromatization in the first place?
I wish I prepared a better answer for this. I don't know. and it's like weirded me out forever because it works for women, and you can see on blood work it works.
Well, I mean, the drug was made for women, right? Like it was a women's breast cancer drug.
Yeah. But it's
co-opted.
But they're not generating their estrogen from aromatization of testosterone. So it's always really kind of, I'm sure we could first principles it, if we had time and work it through, it's probably something I should have at one point, because early on I was kind of against AI for women. I mean, originally I remember around 2000, because I was still in the medical community when Arimidex came out for breast cancer, and even right then when I first learned, because I thought it's anti-estrogen, I figured it was another thing that bound to the estrogen receptor and just left it inert. And never really made sense for me. And so for a little bit of time, I was kind of against it, and I would always recommend Novadex for women because I was like, well, what aromatization are we blocking? But then seeing it on blood work and seeing how effective it is, I've changed my tune on that. But that's something that needs to be understood better, and that's going to be an article on for Team Troponin. I'm going to put something together on that because I don't think I've seen anything done on that.
Well, what's interesting too is I think that a lot of, we look at, I'm probably more aware of women's preps than you are just because I follow more women. And it seems like more and more coaches who coach women talk about how they don't need to use AIs and things like that. And I think it's probably another one of those points on the pendulum that's going to swing back and forth, where for a while it was, very vogue, and now people are trying to be, more conservative in their approach, and that's probably going to come back again. So just thinking about a lot of these women's divisions, I mean, even figure, you're having to come in drier and drier.
Mm-hmm.
How else can you achieve that?
You really can't. I mean,
right.
Even with Novadex, you're probably not going to get, well, you could with compounds that also lower estrogen or inhibit aromatization, with like Proviron, Masteron, Primobolan, but then you're getting into harsh compounds. If you're using Novadex and then Primobolan and Masteron, you are going to have low estrogen, but you're also using a pretty harsh DHT derivative in Masteron. That's you're worse than probably from the side effect position than if you would have just used an AI to begin with. And I'm thinking there's something to do now. It just popped back in my head because they called them suicide inhibitors when they first came out. They didn't. They were obviously aromatase inhibitors, but like the medical information would always call it suicide inhibitors, meaning like it was something permanent. And so I'm sure it's something with that is why it works, despite there being different pathways for the estrogen production. Sorry.
And then one other question that I would have, just as a female competitor. So first off, for any dudes listening, I'm probably going to go off on a soapbox here a little bit. Just because you see a woman in the off season whose face is a little bit rounder doesn't mean she's taking a whole bunch of stuff. Listen to her voice. If her voice still sounds pretty feminine, that's probably a good indicator that she's not on a ton.
It's not probably, that is the indicator. I mean, that really is. You know, I mean, and that's the generally kind of irreversible thing. And I feel bad because I'm sure a lot of females ran into that, and usually probably early on when they were getting bad advice. And but that it's a very obvious, it's common and obvious, but that is the main indicator.
But one of the questions that I would have too would be, impacts on something like fertility, because we're seeing so many more young women, in their 20s, early 20s, like 20, 21, 22. Even locally here in Texas, there's some bikini competitors that I've heard they're on a lot of stuff.
Bikini, especially at the lower levels, when you get to the national level and the pros, they're all pretty even. But proportionally or percentually, who uses the most is the novice bikini competitors. It's wild.
It's so wild. You don't have enough mass for it to really affect.
But that's what it is. It's they got a cute little body, I guess, and their boyfriend was into working out, and he talked them into competing, and they know nothing. The boyfriend knows nothing about female hormones, and he puts them on Anavar, Arimidex, Primobolan, which ends up being Masteron, and then a small dose of test. I see all the time.
We heard, I mean, girls around here, what was our buddy telling us last weekend?
I think it was like NPP, a lot, like a
lot of NPP.
Trend. Maybe even a little trend at the end, for bikini contest.
Yeah, trend. Yeah, I don't see it as much as I used to. I remember seeing trend a lot, right up and around. It seems like when physique came out was when that kind of lowered, I think, and I think probably because the bodybuilders were using it, and I think most of them, the people that went to physique, realized that, well, you know, there's a reason they created physique, and it's a look that's not going to be rewarded, and so you don't see it as much. But yeah, the testosterone, I see. Oh my God, I see the testosterone. More women are on testosterone than men, I think, right now, because they're trying to ban TRT for men, like they're trying to ban telemedicine. TRT.
And you sent me this week on my check-in, just because I was like, hey, like, what do people usually do? You sent me kind of a sample of something you had seen from other people. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's, I mean, your figure, see, what I sent you, I think was even from a figure girl. Yeah. Well, oh no, I sent you, because I even sent you, I sent you a physique sample from another coach. And I won't say any of this yet. Anyways, it was a novice physique competitor, worked up to 40 milligrams of Anavar a day, 200 milligrams of Proban a week, 200 milligrams of equipoise a week. There were injectable L-carnitine. There were other things.
I remember I looked at it, and to me, again, like as someone who gets a little bit overwhelmed looking at these details, I was like, for someone who's not even at like the national level yet, this is like a local state.
Yeah, that's a lot. It was actually. So here are those numbers. You said weekly 200 Primo and 200 EQ, and then it was 40 Anavar a day, so that's 280 a week. So we're looking at just under 700 milligrams total stuff.
And there was something else added in. I can't remember. So it may have reached a. What's that?
It was Winnie.
Oh yeah, yep. So probably a gram a week.
Okay. So maybe this is a little bit of an extreme example, but even so, if we're looking at doses for women being, say, in the 750 to a gram range per week at the end of a prep, like proportionally, that seems like a lot more than men would do. Like if you compare a man's androgen levels on a heavy cycle at the national level compared to what his usual testosterone level would be, it seems like the woman is increasing her androgen levels by like twofold more, maybe even more than that.
Oh yeah, and you'll see it too in the way they change, which is a problem sort of, because they change so fast. I mean, you put a woman like that who's had normal female hormones her whole life, and then at whatever, say she's age 33, and you put her on that, she's going to change by the hour. You know, every week she's going to look dramatically different. And even in a deep calorie deficit, she's going to be adding muscle mass. You know, her total body weight, her total stored energy is going to drop dramatically. But because of the change in profiles from such an estrogenic profile to now such an androgenic profile, they're going to be adding gobs of muscle, which is going to accelerate the fat loss even more. You know, they might be in a deficit that facilitates 2 pounds of fat loss per week, but they might also be gaining 2 pounds of muscle per week, which means they're really going to be losing 4 pounds of fat per week. I mean, it's an immediate transformation. And I've seen this many times, and you can see, like, you know, this stuff's not addicting, but that would be pretty addicting, because a man can never really even do that. I mean, even if a man right to his very first cycle jump, the amount a man would have to take, it wouldn't work anyways, because he would have test flu and he would feel terrible.
Well, I was going to say that, having heard that proportionality argument, like not that we're arguing this, but some people are going to hear that and say, "Oh shit, well I'm a man. I guess I should be taking 4 grams instead of 2, so I can get the same proportionally reap the same effects."
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too. Again, just like probably being hyper aware of what's going on the female side of competing, and you know, what we're criticized for, and when we start to be criticized, and you're looking at some of the very, very strong female powerlifters, when people assume there's, you know, a certain dosage. One of the things that you look at a lot is not just the jawline in terms of like the bone structure, but you're going to see a change in oral facial musculature, and I have the change in facial musculature, not the jaw structure. But that's because I think, this is again purely hypothesis, as you get stronger, if you're not coupling your bracing strategy properly and you end up overbracing with places in your neck and your jaw and your cervical spine, you're going to get a change in mandibular position. Now, that change in mandible position is going to change a lot of all of this looks like.
It's funny you say that. I think, when I don't have it really anymore because I don't lift as heavy as like I used to. But when my wife was in dental school and I first went in to see her, she was absolutely like mesmerized by the thickness of all the fascia through here.
It's wild. I saw videos of myself when I was lifting with James, and I was like, wait a minute. And I had to stop for a second. I was like, no, that's not a change in the bone structure. That's a complete change in a lot of the, God, I need to make an article on this on the site too, because the amount of muscles that are responsible for pressurization, like the hypoglossal, where they attach in the cervical spine and how that attaches to the jaw and changes the position. And then as you get stronger there, your lifting mechanics bias that more, so you end up getting even more cervical extension. And so you start this cycle that's not necessarily a change in structure so much as it is a reflection of an increase in strength in your body looking for a stabilization or pressurization strategy to keep you safe.
Yeah, so, and you can even see it in me in old photos. It's, you know, like I have it looks like I have a double chin, even in contest prep. It's just so thick through here.
Yeah. So I really want to encourage people to think a little bit differently and not make assumptions, because there's some very, very strong women out there that you can make assumptions about. But if you look at their evolution over time, if that's really the only change that you see, it's probably not PED related. It's probably more related to the fact that their CNS is outpacing their muscular system.
And I want to say with a caveat, I really hate having gear. I don't hate having them, but I because I'm not like a low dose. I'm not one of those guys who tries to act like you need nothing or they don't play a role, or they do. They play a major role, so much of a role that no one is ever going to place top 10 at a pro show without them. You know, I mean, Ronnie Coleman would have been the closest possible human, I would imagine, to genetically to being able to do that. So anabolics play an absolutely huge role. And so like, I hate having these because then people just, unless you say, take everything, take 10 grams of trend, people will say, oh, you know, they're lying. And I don't want, like, I don't care if people think I took a lot or didn't take a lot. I'll tell people what I took. My favorite cycle, oh, my kids don't watch this. My go-to was like 1.2 grams of test and a gram of EQ. That was my every off season. That was like that was my peak before I had any of the lethargy or the difficulties eating or anything like that, and just maximal efficiency as far as nutrient absorption. And I felt like Superman. And anytime I tried to go higher or add harsher compounds or add an oral, it never improved things. So that's not low dose. You know, that's over 2 grams. That's, you know,
that's my thought exactly. And like, I mean, I'll say it too. Like my best has been about 1 gram each of test and primo because I think it's a little better than EQ, and now we can afford it.
Yeah, well, this was back when it was really. I mean, it was pre-China. Really, it was really hard to find primo. Okay. It would have been primo now.
But it's funny how and you see this actually, like people are getting so much more open because everyone knows more about it now. And you'll see on social media, a good bodybuilder will say something similar to what we just said. They'll put up exactly what they take, and the total will come out to around 2 grams. And people will tell them that they're lying. It's like, since when is that not a good amount?
Oh yeah. Well, no matter what it is, it's not enough. And it cracks me up because no one's that's trying to turn pro or trying to win pro shows is limiting their doses because of any moral superiority or anything like that. It's because there's for a reason, because you, after a certain point, you start feeling sluggish, lethargic. Your appetite goes in the shitter. If you had orals in, it's even worse. Your appetite plummets, and so you can't grow. The gear doesn't add muscle. It doesn't. It allows muscle to be added. Muscle is protein. Muscle comes from food. What I always like to think of it as is building a house. Like your training would be like the general contractor. They tell everyone, we're working on this portion of the house today, and then your food would be all the raw materials. Do we have the wood? Do we have the nails? Do we have the drywall? Do we have the screws? And so you need to make sure all those are there. The general contractor will point you there. And then the gear is basically the number of employees you have, and so, but if you get so many employees that you've got 3 employees trying to hammer the same nail, and people bumping into each other, and two of them are sleeping and, you know, laying on the Ryko drill that someone needs. But that is how it works. You know, you need to optimize everything. And so the gear stuff just always drives me crazy, because believe me, if 15 grams of gear a week is what it took to look like Ronnie Coleman, everyone would be doing that. Yeah. I mean, no one's.
I wouldn't want to play Ronnie.
Especially with the prices now. So it's really frustrating. But people, so my general thing now is just like, the people who are in disbelief of that, be in disbelief. Go ahead and try, because everyone does. Everyone did. Everyone tried the higher doses. Everyone tried pushing it. Everyone tried 2 grams a test, and then everyone eventually realizes that there's a reason that people know about the term test flu, and it's not because from medical journals. It's because enough people have tried taking 2 grams or whatever and realizing they felt like they had the flu.
It's funny that you mentioned how women don't as much run into that issue, because, well, I guess what I'm getting at is what is the reason for that? So, you know, a woman could take 750 a gram of total stuff and not even get close to the point of having test flu or other similar side effects that would really make it not worth it. So is that just because women have nearly the same androgen receptor density or something like that?
You know, that's a good question. But some of the side effects aren't going to be as big of an issue for women, like appetite.
Mm-hmm.
Like for you, we're at 300 pounds, you know, so a reduction in appetite is a big hit for you. No woman is eating enough food. Very few women are eating enough food, even in the off season, where they're thinking like, oh God, I don't know how I'm going to get this next meal down. It's just their metabolism. They just don't carry the muscle mass. And Danny is in prep right now, so she really understands.
Yeah, no, we definitely. Dave posted a picture on his Instagram yesterday with a story being like, oh, sad low day meal. And I literally, like, it's so funny. You get into prep and your body, before you even know it, goes into this like scarcity mindset. I kid you not, I started like salivating, like actually drooling, and got like anxious over looking at his food. And like when he goes to eat his food at night, Dave is a larger male and has a lot of this, which means that he breathes and chews kind of loud. And I can't even be in the room right now because it just sets off this anxiety in me. It's, oh man.
So you're talking like even your big female bodybuilders, you're talking maybe they're eating 40 grams of protein per meal, 5, maybe 6 meals, rarely more than 50 grams of carbs per meal, not very much added fat. You know, that's a tiny, I mean, Dave would need 15 of those a day.
I feel like we did pretty well with my food this off season. I had 2 high days.
Very good.
It was relatively high. It's not as high as it's ever been, but it was pretty high. And it still was like, I remember like most of the off season, I was like, I'm still hungry.
Yeah.
I have a question about that though, specifically for women. So like obviously with men, it's kind of one way or the other. Either you're starving in prep or you're too full to really want to eat in the off season. But with women, like, why is there such a big discrepancy between appetite and metabolism for women? And does that discrepancy still apply to, I guess, the normal woman who's fit but isn't taking gear? Or does gear like really exacerbate this difference in women?
Well, if you think about it, our bones, like what is our non-calorie burning portions of our body? Our bone structures aren't that much different. You know, like men are typically taller, but for the same height, they're pretty similar. You know,
I think the total weight, like in a cadaveric dissection, the total weight difference from someone like my height to Dave's height was maybe 10, 15 pounds. It wasn't all that much.
Yeah. Skeletons?
Yeah. Between skeletons and like organs, like intestines and water with it.
Yeah. So when a muscular female at 170 pounds or a muscular male at 300 pounds, that's 100. The male has 130 pounds of additional calorie burning material. Almost, you know, where the female only has what we say 175 pounds of total body weight. Period. You know, so she might only have 60 pounds of maybe probably more than that. She might have 90 pounds of muscle mass, of pure muscle, where the male has, you know, 100, yeah, exactly, yeah. So it's just because the amount of muscle mass is so much higher. The
difference in metabolism totally makes sense for those reasons. I guess maybe this is wrong, but I would hope, this isn't the case, but I would hope that would lead to a big difference in appetite. But it seems like many women.
Small meal is a small meal.
Yeah.
And so if we're chronically eating, I mean, think about it right now. If all of my meals throughout the week are like tiny, yes, by the time a cheat meal comes around, I'm going to be able to out-eat just about anybody.
Yeah.
Even aside from cheat meals, it seems like for women, appetite it just sucks. You have to deal with more hunger.
I think some of it is visual too, right? So like appetite, we think about as our stomach growling. So that's where things like hunger cues, and also, knowing that appetite is more than just a hunger cue. It's a sensory integration. So visually looking at a plate, visually looking at other people eating, your brain is constantly taking in all this other information. And so when you have one bit and other people around you have much more than that, it can really do a lot to stimulate the brain to say, like, there's a difference between A and B.
Actually, that's a good point. There's been studies on that with regards to economics, how even when people are all better off objectively, a big discrepancy in wealth leads to a lot of
crime. It doesn't matter. Even if the poor people in town A would be rich in town B, if the rich people in town A are very, very wealthy, then there's going to be crime. But there's other things also. As women, the error bar is just so much smaller. You know, if a man can eat 6,000 calories a day and he goes a little bit over and he eats 6,150 calories, that's that's almost nothing. It affects it is more, and he stores it, but it's a really small amount. Where if a woman's eating 1,800 calories a day and she eats 150 calories more, that's a 10. I don't want to do the math. Was that 9%, 8% difference in total calories? Where for the man it was like a fraction. So it's in it, and it's the sum of all those things combined. Where every time a man eats 100 calories more per day, yes, he stores that, but his metabolism is so much higher, it really doesn't change his body weight very much. But every time a woman does, it makes a bigger negative impact.
And let's say the man walks 2,000 extra steps per day, where his 2,000 steps burns more calories than a small woman's 2,000 steps. 2,000 steps.
Yeah,
greater disparity growing between the two.
Yeah, you want some pain. Dave probably burns 80 to maybe even 100 calories per 1,000 steps. Danny probably burns 30.
Yeah.
Every prep that we've prepped together, I always look at how much we laugh about this, because so much of how I interpret the world is based on comparison, not as like a one is better than the other so much as for me, like that's how we gather data. It's like I look at what are all the other potential options out there in terms of like what does life look like for people. And every prep we've done together, it absolutely blows my mind how much harder I have to work to basically come in with the conditioning that for women's physique, now they're wanting basically men's open conditioning.
Yeah. And your hormonal
profile makes it even harder.
Yeah, does not want that to happen. Your baseline is about 10% body fat. Your homeostasis is 10% body fat higher, and you have to get to the same body fat. I remember
crazy when I go to the gym and I see guys in prep 12 weeks out talking about wanting to be better than next year and being hungry for it, and like you see them like half-assing things, and I'm like, it disgusts me that you can get away with that and still improve. Because if I half-ass anything, it shows. Because
I had a big eye opener actually, because I remember years ago working, and with a client and asking and wanting her to burn a certain number of calories on the step mill, and her like really struggling and saying like, Coach, I'm sorry, I'm working. I can't keep them. I don't remember what the number was, but I'm like, because I put my weight in, on the step mill, and I'm like, I burned 500 calories just warming up. What are you doing? And so I put her weight in there and did my normal cardio, and I was like, oh my Lord, I went from burning, like 480 calories in 20 minutes to burning like 180 calories in 20 minutes.
Yeah, but I will say it's been actually nice on prep this year. This is the first year that we've done all LISS. We haven't had any HIIT yet. And it's probably been so far, aside from today was the first, yesterday was pretty rough. But up to this point, it's been a little bit easier to recover and train harder, which I think is going to let me retain more size. I need every bit I can get. It's been interesting looking at the progress using just LISS compared to a combination of HIIT and LISS.
And it's kind of weird on that because I've like people, obviously I have a style currently, but like if you take a client of mine from 2007, 2004, 2013, 2017, they would all think that I prep differently. You know what I mean? Because for years I did do LISS, and for years I did exclusively LISS. One of the reasons I went away from it was I found that no matter what I did, I tell people they go on the treadmill and I tell them not to hold on, but what happens is they do. And eventually they're doing a 10% incline for 40 minutes at 4 miles an hour, which they are not doing. They're holding on and leaning back. So it's about a 1% incline at most, and they're basically just letting their feet drag along, because they're holding their body weight against it. And I realized, I was like, I could tell people not to do it. And the reason I realized it's going to happen is because I would end up doing the same thing. I would catch myself just doing it, because I want to know that I'm working harder and I want the treadmill to go faster and I want to stay at a higher incline, but it's hard and it becomes less hard when I lean back. And so that's why that was one of the reasons I started forcing the LISS, because then I was like, okay, you have the forcing the HIIT because you have the high intensity. You're not going to be inclined to do those little like things those cheats that creep up on you because you get the rest after. But then, and you've kind of more and more been changing my view on HIIT with females, because females tend to push their LISS quite a bit harder than the men do from my experience also. I mean, I leave it pretty open, but whenever I ask, like the men will be like, oh yeah, I was doing 3 miles an hour at a 6% incline. I'm like, okay, that's LISS. One will be like, I was 12% incline at 3.6 miles. I'm like, that's not LISS.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. My LISS right now is like, I go light handhold because I'll close my eyes and I don't want to fall over, but I don't ever grab. But for me, having short legs, 2.9 to 3 miles an hour is like I'm getting a lot of steps.
And if you're in an incline, that's the thing. Like people don't realize if you're really not holding on, you're. Go on any hike. Go on any hike and walk. Go to like Monte Picchu or something, like on a vacation, and see like climb up some old Aztec thing that's a 10% incline, 10% grade, and realize like that's different than what I'm doing when I'm holding on. And but just in general, it's hard to know the best approach because like we said, for every 1,000 steps walking around outside, you're probably burning about 30 calories. Dave could be burning as much as 100 calories for every 1,000 steps. So you do, 70,000 steps for a week. That's a massive calorie difference by the end of the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for people listening right now, that's what Justin has me doing. I have structured lists, a certain number of times per week, but then he also has a step count. And as an athlete, I'm loving it. It's actually letting my stress stay lower because I'm in a routine and a rhythm that, especially for me, like last year I was pushing HIIT so hard that with the heat, that's one of the things that stopped off my seizures. I would finish a HIIT session in our garage and like literally fall in our bedroom. Dave would come in and put an ice pack on my back and I tried like not to seize for 20, 30 minutes. So
which makes it take as long as a LISS session anyway.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, like it's nice. It's hard because by the end of the day, I've talked about this on my blog on the site. I get a case of the floaties, the case of the floaties. But I will say it's nice having a rhythm and a routine where I get up every morning, I go on my walk, I have my walking path. I have certain things that I listen to while I walk, come home, start a little bit of a work day. I have to wait another like hour and a half before I get my first meal. And then I go train and I walk after training and then we go for a walk together at night. And I think just keeping stress low for me, I mean, this is like I was telling you the other night, this is like the most at peace I've been throughout a prep maybe ever. And I think a lot of that is just that my sympathetics aren't ramped up from sucking air so much on the Stairmaster.
It's interesting how psychology might affect that as well. Because, I mean, I don't love doing tons of HIIT either, but I think I come down from it pretty easily. Like I'll be ramped up while I'm doing it and come inside and take 5 and I feel like I'm back to baseline. I'm parasympathetic pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
The other thing that's hard is, like we always talk about, you're not working with robots. Like you're a professional athlete. So I know when I tell you 70,000 steps for the week, you're going to do 70,000 steps.
Probably more, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, but one of the reasons I've traditionally been hesitant to do a step count is because that is incredibly easy to cheat yourself on, and kind of just not really, like it's not like people like plan to cheat themselves, but if they know they have to do 30 minutes on the step mill, they're going to do 30 minutes on the step mill. If they know they're supposed to get 10,000 steps a day and they don't, like not everyone, but there's a big range of people that as a coach you have to work with
How do people cheat a weekly step count? Like if you don't hit your 10K,
they just won't. They'll just.
So like if one day someone gets 8K, they're not going to go and make up the other 2K another day.
Yeah, exactly. And they just think, and it's probably seems like insane to you, but like not everyone is a professional athlete. I mean, there's because I work with everyone, and the people who need a coach because they're in terrible shape, they're that way because of a whole list and a whole life of small little things like that, thinking like, oh, this doesn't matter, or thinking like, oh, well, like a couple French fries.
One small decision.
Exactly.
Like all those small decisions are your habits, and your habits are your grounding force where you get to or don't get to.
Yeah, and so it's really hard to decide who to have do what, because if I give like a 45-year-old woman who's been overweight her whole life, if I tell her 5 sessions of 30 minutes of cardio per week, she's going to do them. She might miss one and she'll report that she missed one, but she'll know, and she'll do 30 minutes and stop at exactly 30 minutes. If I tell her a step count, I don't know what the adherence rate is in comparison, but I assume it's lower.
And over the course of something like 6 months, that's going to come out. That's going to be a noticeable difference. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Well, it's been really nice this year, and obviously, I think as a competitor, you're always hungry to be at your best. But one of the things that I've really worked on this year mentally is trying to not run myself into the ground, because we got to Chicago and Tampa both last year, and I was so fatigued. Like I sent you videos from Chicago when I got to the hotel, and you were like, please sit down, because I couldn't do anything without my whole body just shaking.
Well, we did, I don't even remember what we did in that Airbnb where it was like we were like back and forth, like
in Tampa.
Yeah. I don't even remember exactly what we did, but it was like, we're way too far this way. We got to fix that. Oh my God, we got to fix that.
Yeah.
And it worked out, and it was a great look. But yeah, you definitely run yourself to zero.
Yeah. So as a competitor, I'm trying to kind of toe that line of, working hard, and obviously want to do a whole lot better this year than I did last year. And at the same time, recognizing that me putting myself in a position where I'm so tired, I can't even present well. That's not beneficial. If anything, that just makes all the weeks of work kind of a wasted experience in a way.
Yeah, it's hard. I always used to say you almost never get to do this. Very rarely you do, and it's awesome. Those are like the awesome preps. But you don't, like you can consider stage day like a finish line. You want to be like sprinting across the finish line, but usually you're limping, dragging one leg. You got puke on your shirt, probably some diarrhea, and just trying to get across the finish line. And that's just it's hard to navigate it perfectly, because you don't want to be that way. You have to be in shape, and if diarrhea and vomit and limping is required to get in shape, that's what's required. But if in an ideal prep, that's not what happens. In an ideal prep, things go smoothly, your stress levels are low, you're confident in how you look, and you're not, you're ready. You're still working hard, but you're not trying to make miracles happen the last 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's something that differs between men and women? Like basically just on a psychological basis, is it harder to get a woman into a place where she's in that kind of perfect prep where she's sprinting across the finish line versus a man.
And chill out.
Yeah. I mean, there's just, and it's harder because of the calorie ability. You know, you can do it, but if you put a woman on a 24-week prep, but in my experience, like the mental aspects of prep past 16 weeks just accelerate to the downside exponentially. Like a 12-week prep, nothing. 16-week, hard, noticeably harder than 12-week prep, but it feels like a prep. An 18-week prep is already like, it feels like I prepped twice as long as a 16-week prep.
I will say I'm feeling that right now. I've said to Dave, and part of this is because we've gotten a lot of change the last couple of weeks, but there have been a number of times this week I've looked at Dave and I'm like, I feel like I'm so much closer than 11 weeks out, just because I feel like I've been.
So you could do it. You put a woman on a 24-week prep. You could coast in. You get her to 4 weeks out. She's striated glute. She's ready. So you bring 50 grams of carbs in post-workout on training days. Now she's got a little bit of life to her physique. Metabolism picks up a little bit, you know. Maybe you can pull back some of the fat burners. She fills back, you know, everything's looking better. But that would be if she was able to do a 24-week prep without losing her mind, which I mean, I know like Matt Porter used to do 20-week preps. I've never had anyone go past 18 weeks and go into the show like a Spartan. You know, they're always like just done with it after that point.
It's funny we're talking about this because as we're getting into kind of a lot of the first shows of the season now, or a lot of the first, I guess, preps are starting for the summer shows. We see a lot of people, some people we know, just a lot of people online that seem to be doing like the 20 to 24 week preps. It seems to be really popular right now, especially among, I guess, coaches who are known for being more, I don't know, cerebral or evidence-based or however you want to say it. And I don't know, 16-week prep seems very hard. When someone tells me they're doing a 20-week prep on purpose for one show, I just...
And how do you make progress? When you do a 24-week prep, it's like you're prepping half the year.
Right. Yeah. And the people that do these lengths of preps usually aren't starting from a bad point. They usually stayed in good shape in their off season. My thought is just why do that? I mean, 1,000 calorie deficit sucks about as much as an 800 calorie deficit or a 1,200 calorie deficit, and that's probably why you like.
And that's about the difference.
Yeah.
It's weird because there's an evolution. Preps were always 12 weeks, always through the 90s, early 2000s. You prep 12 weeks, and some people it was like a 10-week prep. Like you'll see a lot of powerlifting preps or 10 weeks. It used to be they were kind of similar, like like I got to meet in 10 weeks, I got to show in 10 weeks, but then it was kind of 12 weeks, making a nice, easy, round 3-month number, and that's the reason why one of my coaching plan options is quarterly. Is because that used to be a contest prep package, because everyone did 12-week preps always, all up until about 2005 or 6 or 7. That was at 12-week preps, and then then I switched to 16 because I was or 14 or 16 because it was like, okay, like some of these guys I'm like killing them to get in shape in time. Let me extend a little bit, and then like 6 weeks is the kind of standard, but then now you're seeing it extend out even further. But once again, like I always say, like I don't think people step back and think like, when was bodybuilding at its best? Everyone knows there's a time frame when it was, and we just keep doing things differently than what was the standard back then, and it's not improving things.
That's a really good point. I think it's especially important given how many new coaches are kind of up and coming and wanting to sound very important, and it's kind of like, okay, but like learning from you, where again, you've been around coaching for 20 years now. It's kind of one of those where if it's been done, you've probably seen it. And if you've seen it and it's not the best way to do it, you're not going to do it.
That's a good point, though. I have thought that maybe the newness of a lot of competitors, because bodybuilding is still niche, but it's becoming a lot more trendy. And so I think there's kind of like a lower barrier to entry in terms of like what you're willing to go through mentally and physically. And I think a 20-week or 24-week prep sounds pretty terrible, but if you've never done a prep, or if you've only ever done a prep that was that long, it might sound like a better idea because think low and slow, it won't be as bad.
Yeah.
And then I think a lot of people have done that from the jump, from their first show, And if you've done that, if you've always done 20 weeks, 22 weeks, whatever, then it might seem almost impossible to you to think you could make such a dramatic transformation that you always do in a prep in 16 weeks or less.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like to me, like our first prep, I mean, it was definitely fluffier to start with because it was our first prep. And I was pretty amazed at what happened in 16 weeks. And I still am kind of always amazed at how much of a visual change you get in that time frame.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like John Rivas, we'd prep 9 weeks for the Arnold. You know, I mean,
he looked so good in person too.
Yeah, he could have been a tad sharper, but I mean, well, you guys know I was stressed that we weren't going to pull it off.
Yeah.
But all the way up until right into the end. But yeah, we pulled it together.
He looked phenomenal. Seeing him in person too was so different than like photos on stage.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was hard to have them full though. That's the only problem. That's one of the problems with like a super short prep like that, because it's, you know, we were doing like no fats and no carbs at like 8 weeks out. You know.
Yeah, he said he was like no added fats for like 9 weeks basically.
Yeah, and so
I remember.
Do you think that the ability to retain glycogen and retain water in the right places is something that really needs to be nurtured over a longer term? If you really
Yeah, you there's no way. I mean, because he ate, you know, we did like 1,000 grams of carbs, like a 3-day carb up, and then the day before the show, he was eating like 21 grams of fat per meal with a bunch of carbs, with a bunch of protein.
Wow.
You know, and it's just like that's a big body to try to, you know, and his metabolism's flying. You know, we haven't pulled out fat burners. That's the one thing people forget. You know, like people get scared to add anything. Like, you know, that they've been dieting and it's like you cut carbs to a certain point and they think if you add like 50 grams of carbs, somehow they're magically going to get fat. It's like, you know, like,
totally that way. I mean, like we even talked about, you're like, let's try and maybe bring you in a little early so you can eat in the show. My first thought to that was, I'm going to lose my lines, even this far out, and I don't even have like the goggles on yet.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you're still only eating like 50 grams of carbs a day, you know?
Well, I always think that those last few days, like you have a couple low days where you train, so that's depleting, and then you start giving us a little food. So I've gone from off season, and then 14 weeks later, I'm thinking, oh no, these 50 post-workout carbs are going to make me too fat for the show.
Yeah. Where in the off season you were eating 150 grams or whatever or more. But the next show we do, we'll get to do, because it's very few people that get to do like a full 3-day fill out, and that's when it's really fun. Sorry, Danny, but
no, it took me 3 days last time. So
actually, no, yeah, you were tough to get filled out, but those are fun because you kind of get like you get some room for wiggle room, you know, because like that first day, it's like, well, let's just add a bunch, you know, because your metabolism's flying. If we're filling out too fast, we just pull back a little bit. And so it's but you don't get to do that very often because you really have to have a guy that's 250 plus on stage to get like a full 3-day, you know, big heavy carb out.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're probably coming close to when we should be wrapping up. But again, if you guys have any questions, comments, anything you want us to touch on in a little bit more depth, drop them in the comments below. We do try to make content out of that on the site, and if not, we'll try and talk about it again here. Again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please be sure to share, like, comment, subscribe. It really goes a long way for us, guys. We so appreciate your support, but it's really helpful if you continue to share our content too. So thank you very, very much.
Yep. Thank you, guys. And
thank you.
Next week.